Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. And welcome aboard. Aren't we lucky to be here, right? And for those of you who just arrived, I also just arrived. So for me, it's sort of breakfast time, but I promise to catch up with the ship's time. And by introduction, I am a merchant mariner, U.S. Coast Guard licensed ship's officer, and I've worked in ship operations around the world. I've been to the Seychelles and the Indian Ocean many times, so I'm here to talk about the islands and some oceanography and also some exploration and different things of interest in this remarkable ocean. But today I'm just going to talk about the Seychelles. We are here already, so this talk is just a little taste of what you'll see, particularly tomorrow. And then I'll go into other talks about the other islands and other aspects. But this has been called the Fortunate Islands because they are particularly conveniently located far away from any other landmass. Now, it's about 1,000 sea miles south of the Red Sea, about 800 off of Tanzania. It's been called the Galapagos of the Indian Ocean, or the Hawaiian Islands of the Indian Ocean, because they, like the other islands, they have relatively calm seasonal weather. They have a rainy season and a dry season, but as it is only covers the equatorial region, that is usually a place which is not afflicted by cyclones and the kind of heavy monsoon rains even that go up to India, or the storms that just hit Madagascar and the Comoros Islands. And so these islands are sort of a bit apart from Africa, but they're very much kin to Africa and India, and then the other communities of the larger ocean. But the Seychelles are particularly curious because they sit right off of the mid-ocean trench that is the expanding part of the Indian Ocean, just like the Pacific has that, and most famously the Atlantic has a big expanding fracture zone. But the Seychelles in this old charter, off of the abyssal plain, off of the African coast, but in the history of the evolution of the planet and the tectonic plates, the granite formations of the Seychelles were originally part of the Indian landmass, but somehow got grounded and stuck where they are now, whereas the Indian subcontinent, as it still is doing, moved up north and then created this large ocean. The Laccadive and the Maldive Islands are mostly coral, but the Seychelles are unusual because they have these incredible granite mountains and islands and formations that make it quite famous. There are a count of 110, 140, depending on how big a rock you want to count. Of course, we are right now in Victoria, the biggest island, the commercial island. Then there are these other groups, the Almirante, the Alfonso group, the Aldabra group, and these are often rocky outcrops with coral fringes. Almost everybody lives on Mahe and La Digue and the other islands up into the north, though. Many of the other islands are still uninhabited, or else now they're nature preserves. So here we are close up. We're just right here in Victoria, and we'll be sailing all for an hour or two off to La Digue and Placine for our landing in the nature reserves and on the beautiful scenery that's there. Of course, this group is sort of famous for its pristine environment, clear air, calm seas, coral beaches, and atolls. And so you get this in many other places in the world, Polynesia, the Caribbean places, but the Seychelles are perhaps the best preserved of all island ecosystems in the world, and have been largely preserved either by the location being so far away or the industry not coming in. There's been some logging and clearing for agriculture, but there's still some old growth endemic forests on some of these islands that have trees that are found nowhere, birds, other animals, which make the Seychelles sort of a biological hotspot, and it gets the attention of many people, especially the government trying to preserve the assets that bring people here to see it. So here we are looking off of, that's actually off of La Digue, And you will see plenty of this. I don't really need to show you pictures of beaches, except that the unique thing about the Seychelles, and particularly at La Digue, is these granite boulders, which seem to be sculpted and tossed around like tumble jacks or something on the beaches. And this is what gives it such character. This is not the only place with this formation. You may know in the BVIs, for instance, they're the same kind of formations. But the wildlife in the Seychelles is famous. When the first sailors came here, there were just so many birds and so many turtles and so many coconuts, and it was just considered a paradise. There was also, because it's mountainous, there was fresh water. And so this made an ideal stopover for many ships came by. This is an endemic blue flycatcher, it's called, in the old growth forests. But the most famous resident of the Seychelles is the Aldabra land tortoise, and these are like the ones in the Galapagos, and they don't go swimming. They are herbivores on the land. They live for hundreds of years. Although I just read that one finally died in somewhere in the UK that was estimated 250 years old. But they usually outlive their owners, and they have been traditionally caught for food. The Seychelles became a destination because the ship would come by and grab these 100-pound so-and-sos and throw them in the hold, and they were the living food, though they cruelly chopped them off one leg at a time to eat them because they were so big. Now, doesn't that look tasty? It's not served in the restaurant. And they've actually been repopulating, and they have preserves where they're not just captive, and like you see in some places we'll go even tomorrow. In the resorts, they have a few, and people have them in their yard and all, but they're trying to get them in the islands that are uninhabited to see how they will evolve after their many 100 million years already. But at one point, the toll on them was that tens of thousands were taken before they were protected. And so now they have a small population, about 5,000, but they're growing. The other products of the Seychelles are mostly coconuts. This was part of the copra trade, where the lush coconut forest would yield so much, and this was the trade for the sailors and schooners. And it's a pan-Indian, Asian, Pacific crop, and it's called the tree of life because it gives food, it gives rattan, it gives medicines, gives oils, and so almost every part of the coconut can be used for the life of the people. Though it's tough work, and it's still very much of a commodity item, which the price goes up and goes down, but the people who actually do the work generally remain poor. But in the Seychelles, and particularly in La Digue, they have the great coco de mer, and this is the world's largest coconut and the world's largest nut. And they're very old growing palms that are densely packed amongst themselves, and they fruit and have, this is the pollinator, and then the plants sort of are so close to each other they don't need anything but a wind to pollinate their flowers. And then this is the great nut, which was considered a holy object. And even if you go to temples in India, they have ancient coco de mer from the Seychelles, which were used as yoni symbology in the Hindu iconography. And so this is the proud product of the Seychelles, though I don't think they'll fit in your handbag to take home. But that's the biggest solo nut. It's very woody, though. It's not used for food. Well, when the first people came, they were probably actually Arabs who came to the islands on their trade routes further north from here. But there is a cemetery on one of the outer islands that is of Islamic design for a shipwreck from maybe about 800. But then the Portuguese came around Cape Hope, and then they came to these islands and started to chart them. They did not settle them, but they were first noted by Vasco da Gama and put on the map. Though the name Seychelles is actually French, after account of Seychelles in France when the French claimed the islands. But these island groups were so far away, and there were no settlers ever. The people came in and got turtles, they got fresh water. They may have been shipwrecked or so, but there was no active colony, and so the place became famous for having pirates of the Indian Ocean come and hide things here or have their little settlements such as they could. And this is the lore of the islands. People are always digging for more gold or other evidence of the pirate loot, but most of it's probably on the next island over, or the next one, or the next one. But the one crop that began an industry for the local people was vanilla beans. And this is, again, an endemic product that's gone around the world. And so when that flavoring was made, that became an industry that continues to the day. Though again, it's sort of artisanal agriculture. You have to go out and tend in small scale to grow vanilla beans and grow the right size, but they're very valuable. So these are some of the people out in the outer islands fishing. And then they have the various little towns. I took this picture a few years ago because you don't see too many of them because the Seychelles have become quite prosperous. But this was sort of typical of the old knock-up construction that the slaves could have, and then if they left the plantation or something, they could actually pick up their house and take it somewhere else. You see this in the Caribbean too, called the chattel house. But the population of the Seychelles is a very mixed. You had Africans who came over who were either fleeing slavery or they were sailors. You had some Arab settlers who came in. You had Indians who came, Malagasy from Madagascar. And so you have this blend of cultures and a kind of a mixture that is very animated. I didn't get the music, but there's a kind of music called motia, which is a dance rhythmic song call and response form from Africa that is sort of the life carnival of the islands. But it's also very colorful here, just because they have tropical environment. This is in a market, all the shawls and goods for sale. And this just is a meeting place from all these people from around the Indian Ocean who came here, whether they wanted to or not. When slavery was abolished, the Royal Navy actually would capture, or rather free slaves from Zanzibar and along the coast, and they would bring them to the Seychelles and free them for the price of working on a plantation or becoming a free person on these farther islands. So this is Victoria, where we are back when it was first settled. And you can see the looming mountains. This is sort of a kind of unimaginable place when people came here. Of course, it's very tropical, and so back in the days before modern medicine, often coming to a beautiful place like this was eventually a one-way trip because of tropical diseases or just the heat or the lack of medical supplies. So many European came and spent their days here, but illness kept the population cut down, and the place has stayed very small ever since, but it's a lot healthier now, of course. Now here's the clock tower. Maybe you saw this in town today. That's the symbol of Mahe in the city. But you can imagine the kind of mixture that came here. Here is a Hindu festival with an elephant and a procession and some Europeans overlooking it. Now, the French and the British kept fighting over it. It went back and forth. The French down in Réunion and Mauritius kept claiming the Seychelles, but it's so far away that they couldn't effectively keep the British out, who then made it a crown colony until 1976. But the mixture of these people is sort of palpable for whatever opinion you may have of that kind of colonial past. It certainly had a little bit of pomp and circumstance. This is the last of the colonial governors. And so in the Seychelles, most people speak English. They also speak a Creole French. But the educational system is mostly set up as British, and they also have a parliamentary government. And now this is the new symbol of the nation, which is about as emblematic as you can get, with the swordfish and And the gull, along with that very uncomfortable knight's helmet. I don't know why anybody would wear that in the tropics. And there's the turtle, which is really the ruler of the islands. And you may have seen this already. I would say the glorious flag of Seychelles, which is about as optimistic a flag as I've seen anywhere. And now it's a peaceful country. They are not afflicted by many of the troubles around on the mainlands around them. And they pride themselves as having the highest per capita income of any African nation. Though they're, let's say, not close to Africa, they're as close to India and other places. But they have a very, raucous democracy. Now, I took this picture just because you can read the Creole, which is a very curious blend of mostly French, but some Hindi words and some African words from Swahili. And so this is why Seychelles, they sort of have to get along because they come from all different places, and then they represent a country that has to cooperate because they are sort of isolated on their own, but they're a leader of what's now that new island nation compact in the United Nations, which is advocating to mitigate climate change for all these low-lying islands that are being flooded. And here it's also Seychelles part of the Commonwealth, of course. But the development is going on with landfill and breakwater and the development we can see here. But as the seas get warmer and rise, it's impacting these islands, so that they're building out further infrastructure. Again, they don't get tsunamis or typhoons here, cyclones or monsoons, really. So it's pretty peaceful, but they can see different places getting eroded by the ocean anyway. So here again is a clock tower with the royal crown on top and a bit of a rainbow. So I would say this is a happy and an optimistic place compared to many of the other places that have trouble around it. But they're getting ready for instance, here is the airport, which when I was last year I took this picture because the breakwater protecting the airport is now broken through. And so you can see around the island they're still constructing seawalls and improvements to make sure that the island is safe. The other problem in this area, of course, is piracy and the troubles on the mainland of Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania. And so I'm a Marine Coast Guard security officer, so we've deployed people. We've been up and down the Red Sea, and the situation comes and goes and gets better and for worse, but it's been a long battle, and some of the Somali pirates, when they're captured, they're brought for adjudication either in Kenya or in the Seychelles. But now we have a whole new set of problems with the Houthi and the problems in the Red Sea, but we'll leave that for another day. But meanwhile, in the Seychelles, it's pretty peaceful. Everybody knows each other. The communities are small. The people are very religious, mostly Catholic with some Anglican, and then a significant Hindi population also. And so there are festivals and cultural influences that people share here. Though I was in my reading, I noted that the most of the Seychellois, they call themselves, they will get married in their religion, but they'll often have living together and children before they finally save enough money to have a big party. And so it's what they call kind of relaxed religion around here. But again, I'll just show you some of the places where we'll be going. These fantastic, almost surreal rock forms. If you've ever been to the in Catalonia to Montserrat, they also have these kind of granite finger-like mountains, which are quite fantastic. That's where Salvador Dali came from, so he painted them like he saw it. I don't know if he ever came over here to see these similar sculptural rocks. And they say some of these beaches, with the prettiest of them, have the most model fashion shoots of any place in the world. So you may see that going on around here. But we'll have our day on the beach, and then we'll have plenty more. As a sailor, I always go to see how the boats are doing, and so there's a few of the old traditional sail fishing vessels. Though, of course, it's a busy modern world with other ways to do it, but you can charter that, go out fishing, go for a ride. But I saw this guy. I was kind of, now where is he going? Must have been, he must have dropped his fishing pole somewhere back there. Or especially where we're going tomorrow, and dig, you can rent a bike. I mean, you may be on an excursion or, just on your own, but it's easy to get around and a lot of conveniences and ways to go over to the other side of the island, see some of the outposts of this rocky island. So this is why people come here, for kind of this mysteries in the midst of paradise, and to get away from the rest of the maddening world and have a view of these very unusual formations. And then maybe if we come here just as a brief visitor, continuing on, but a lot of people come here and either buy a residence or come here every year because once you're used to this environment, it sort of makes every other beach in the world look rather drab almost, particularly when the sun is setting on the rocks or the sea comes in or the clouds come in. It sort of is a mysterious landscape of any I've ever seen. And that's why the resorts have moved in. So this is the main business of the islands, of course, and all these mega resorts that are taking up the best beaches. Though one fellow was telling me today that the government has insisted that any development on the beachfronts allow access to the public. Nobody owns the beach. It's all public property up to the low water line. So that sort of guarantees that the local people are not chased off of their own islands. But every year more and more people come because there are more and more fancy resorts, and particularly fashion or weddings are a big business here. And now this couple really went out on a limb. I wonder how they're doing. But again, as a sailor, what I like to do is go out on a boat and go out to the little islands, and much of the area we are in and whole other groups of these islands have now been made marine preserves. They chased away the international fishing fleet. The Russian fleet was the biggest that operated around here until recently. But because of the preservation, this is a hot spot for spawning and breeding of different animals. This is a whale shark, which is the world's largest fish, but it's a filter feeder, so that diver is not going to get swallowed unless he just wants to go for a view. But they also they've found in the last couple of years, blue whales have been coming to breed in the waters of the Seychelles, and it's been over 100 years since that had been seen before. So in the preservation of the whale populations, it's actually visible off the islands here. And then there are other creatures that are curious. It depends on how far you're going to go down into the depths of the sea, but they have some very unusual ones that have really grown up here. I don't know. Anyway, so this is I would say, a magical place, and you can imagine someday when you are not in such a hurry, you can get your own island like this one, and maybe you can make it even very comfortable. A lot of these are actually preserved, but it's sort of like the dream of isolation until you get a little hungry or thirsty, but it's quite fantastic, some of these sites. So all I can say is you can follow your rainbow, and now we've come to here. Yeah, thank you for coming this early evening. I'll just leave you with a saying, la rêve à portée de main, your dream at your fingertips. So I will be around, and I'd be happy to see you ashore and get to know you on this trip. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have now or as we go off on our adventure. Thank you very much.